There is a very specific kind of exhaustion that only a man who has cared too much will ever truly understand. It does not come from physical labour or a long day at work. It comes from the quiet, relentless drain of pouring your energy into someone who takes it for granted. You know exactly what I am talking about. You remember the days when your mind was completely occupied by her moods, her texts, and her shifting goalposts. You gave your time, you gave your attention, and you gave your loyalty. You tried to communicate and you tried to fix things when the bridge between you two started to crack. But the harder you tried to hold it all together, the further she seemed to pull away. It was a game you did not want to play, yet you found yourself trapped in it anyway. You were fighting for a connection while she was comfortably enjoying the validation of your endless effort. But then something inside of you shifted. It was not a loud explosion of anger, nor was it a dramatic declaration of leaving. It was a quiet, profound realization that you had finally had enough. You looked in the mirror and realized that the man staring back at you was worth far more than the crumbs of affection you were begging for. The desperation faded, the anxiety quieted down, and in their place, a cold, unbreakable clarity finally settled in. You stopped sending the double texts. You stopped asking for clarity where none was being offered. You stopped trying to prove your worth to a woman who was determined to misunderstand your value. You simply walked away not to punish her, but to protect your own peace of mind. You took your focus off her and placed it squarely back onto your own life, your own purpose, and your own skin. And that is exactly when the dynamic completely flips. The moment a woman truly realizes that she has lost you, her entire psychological landscape changes. When the safety net of your unconditional attention is ripped away, the reality of your absence hits her like a freight train. She thought you would always be there waiting faithfully in the background, while she figured out what she wanted. She thought your patience was infinite and your boundaries were weak. She was wrong. You are not the man who waits around in the shadows of someone else's indecision. You are not the backup plan, and you are not the emotional sponge for a woman who does not respect your time. You are the man who knows his worth. You are the man who guards his energy. You are the man who chooses his own path even when walking. It means walking entirely alone. Today we are going to dissect exactly what happens in her mind when she finally realizes that you are gone for good. We are going to look at the undeniable behavioral changes that surface when the phantom of your absence becomes her daily reality. You need to understand these shifts not to win her back, but to protect yourself from the psychological trap she's about to set. Let us look at the absolute truth behind her actions when she knows she has permanently lost you. Let us dive deep into the psychology of human nature, specifically the principle known as loss aversion. It is a fundamental truth of the human condition that people rarely value what they get for free. When your time, your affection, and your presence were freely given, they held almost no perceived currency. You were a constant, predictable force in her life. She woke up knowing you were there, and she went to sleep knowing she still had you. In her mind, your devotion was not a rare gift to be cherished. It was a baseline guarantee. This predictability bred complacency. It allowed her to explore other options, test your boundaries, or simply neglect the relationship without any real fear of consequence. But the moment you walked away and instituted absolute silence, you shattered her entire framework of reality. You took back your power, and in doing so, you triggered a massive psychological shockwave. Loss aversion dictates that the pain of losing something is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining it. While you were present, your value was practically invisible to her. Now that you are gone, your absence takes up all the oxygen in the room. The silence you have created is absolutely deafening. It forces her to confront the massive void you left behind, a void she previously thought she could fill effortlessly. She is suddenly forced to process the reality that you were not a permanent, immovable fixture. She is realizing that your kindness was not weakness, but a conscious choice you made every single day. And she is now understanding, perhaps for the very first time, that you possess the strength to choose differently. When the steady stream of your validation dries up, she experiences a very real emotional withdrawal. Her ego, which was previously inflated by your constant attention, suddenly deflates and hits the cold, hard ground. You must understand what this shift actually means. You are no longer dealing with the woman who felt superior, aloof, and completely detached. You are now dealing with a woman whose ego has been severely bruised. She is not necessarily missing the core of who you are as a man. She is missing exactly how you made her feel about herself. She is missing the pedestal you put her on, and she is secretly panicking because someone else might soon occupy that space in your life. This is the exact moment where her perception of you violently changes. You are no longer the desperate guy she could easily manipulate or keep on the back burner. You have become an enigma. You have become a challenge. You have become the man who walked away without looking back. By reclaiming your independence, you have instantly multiplied your perceived value in her eyes. But you must not let this newfound value confuse your sharp Stoic logic. It is incredibly common for men to misinterpret this psychological shift as genuine regret or profound love. Do not fall into that trap. Her sudden realization of your worth is a raw reaction to loss, not a sudden magical awakening of true devotion. If she only sees your value when you are no longer there to provide it, she never truly respected you in the first place. You do not want a woman who requires your absence to recognize your worth. You want a partner who honors your presence. You want someone who sees your high value when you're sitting right next to her, not just when you're walking out the front door. The dynamics have shifted permanently because you changed the rules of the game. You stopped playing the exhausting role of the endless provider of emotional comfort. You drew a thick line in the sand and you stood firmly behind it without flinching. This shift in power is profound, but it is also highly dangerous if you do not understand the mechanics operating behind it. Her internal panic will inevitably lead to erratic action. Her bruised ego will demand that she tries to regain control of the narrative you just hijacked. She will want to test if this new Stoic version of you is real, or just a temporary facade you constructed to get her attention. You must prepare yourself for what comes next. You are not the man who falls for cheap psychological tricks. You are the man who sees right through the illusion. You are the man who understands that her sudden spike in interest is rooted deeply in her own insecurity, not your inherent flaws. When you fully grasp this concept of loss aversion, you detach yourself from the emotional roller coaster. You observe her shifting behavior from a place of grounded, immovable strength. You are ready for the games to begin, but you refuse to play. When the initial shock of your absence settles in her first move is rarely a grand, honest apology. It is almost always a subtle, highly calculated test. This brings us to the very first behavioral change that you will notice when she realizes she has lost you the accidental breadcrumbing. Breadcrumbing is the art of throwing out tiny, insignificant morsels of attention just to see if you are still hungry enough to bite. It is a low-risk, high-reward strategy designed entirely to protect her ego, while simultaneously checking your emotional pulse. She does not want to risk rejection by openly asking you to come back or admitting she was wrong. Instead, she will manufacture situations that require almost zero vulnerability on her part. You will suddenly notice her name popping up in your social media notifications after weeks of absolute silence. It might be a random like on a post you made a long time ago. It might be her viewing every single one of your stories within minutes of you posting them. Sometimes it is the classic accidental reaction to a photo followed by no message at all. Do not mistake these digital fingerprints for a desperate romantic plea for your love. She is simply casting a fishing line into the dark water to see if you will immediately tug on it. She wants to know if you are still monitoring her every move and waiting in the wings. She wants you to overthink that single, analyze the timing of it, and ultimately break your own silence to reach out to her first. It is an open invitation for you to do the heavy emotional lifting so she can comfortably regain the upper hand. Then comes the random, seemingly innocent text message. It usually arrives late at night on a lazy Sunday afternoon or during a holiday. It will say something entirely meaningless like, "I just drove past that coffee shop we used to go to," or "A song came on the radio and it made me think of you." It might even be a link to a meme or a funny video with zero context attached to it. Understand this clearly. This is not a profound realization of her mistakes or a genuine attempt to rebuild trust. It is a highly strategic ping to your emotional radar. She is actively testing the perimeter of your newly established boundaries. If you reply eagerly if you ask her how she is doing, or if you show any sign of excitement, she instantly gets her answer. She immediately knows that your silence was just a temporary tactic, a fake front and not a permanent shift in your self-respect. The moment you give her that validation, the mystery vanishes, her ego is fully fed, and she will very likely pull away from you all over again. But perhaps the most manipulative form of breadcrumbing is the manufactured emergency. She will suddenly reach out because she desperately needs your specific expertise on something trivial. She needs you to help fix a sudden problem with her car, or she asks for urgent advice on a situation at work that you previously discussed. She plays the role of the damsel in distress, betting heavily on your deeply ingrained masculine instinct to protect, fix, and provide. She knows that good men are natural problem solvers by design. She is weaponizing your own honorable nature against you. She is hoping that your desire to be helpful will completely override your strict commitment to walking away. It is an emotional trap designed to pull you back into her orbit without her ever having to take a single ounce of accountability for why you had to leave in the first place. It takes immense discipline to look at a message from a woman you once cared for deeply and choose to do absolutely nothing. Your brain will try to trick you in these moments. Your lingering attachment will try to convince you that maybe, just maybe, this is the opening you have been waiting for all along. It will whisper that ignoring her is too harsh, too cold, or that a simple polite reply cannot possibly hurt your progress. Do not listen to that weak, desperate voice inside your head. That is simply the ghost of your past self trying to sabotage your newly built strength. You must see these low-effort tactics for exactly what they are. You are not a fish waiting to be caught on a cheap hook. You are not a dog waiting eagerly for a few dropped crumbs from the dinner table. You are not the man who accepts less than genuine, consistent and respectful communication. You are the man who demands absolute clarity in his life. You are the man who recognizes manipulation and meets it with stone-cold indifference. When she drops these breadcrumbs, your response must be absolute, unbroken silence. Your silence is the most powerful answer you could possibly give. When the breadcrumbs fall flat and your wall of silence remains impenetrable, her panic begins to escalate. She realizes that low-effort tactics are no longer working on the man you have become. This is the exact moment she pulls out a much heavier emotional weapon. This is the second behavioral change you will witness when she truly understands she has lost you the nostalgia trap. If she cannot hook you with curiosity or a fake emergency, she will try to reel you back in with the intoxicating power of the past. Suddenly, she transforms into the woman you always wished she would be at the end of your relationship. She reaches out with a deeply emotional, carefully crafted message. She will talk about a specific beautiful memory the two of you shared. She will mention that weekend trip where everything felt perfect, or the way you used to look at her when things were simple. She will tell you how much she misses your laugh, your advice, or the way you made her feel safe. She might even send you an old photograph of the two of you smiling together, accompanied by a message that simply says, "I was just looking at this and my heart broke." This is an incredibly dangerous phase for any man trying to rebuild his life. It is dangerous because it targets your deepest, most vulnerable emotional core. When you read those words, your brain floods with dopamine and the warm glow of romanticized history. You are transported back to the honeymoon phase. You remember the woman who adored you, not the woman who drained you, disrespected your time, or took your loyalty for granted. The nostalgia trap is designed to make you suffer from emotional amnesia. It makes you completely forget the months of coldness, the endless arguments, and the agonizing disrespect that forced you to walk away. You must understand the psychology behind this sudden burst of sweetness. When a woman realizes she has lost control over you, her ego experiences a severe state of withdrawal. She is not necessarily grieving the loss of your actual partnership. She is grieving the loss of the mirror you provided for her. You made her feel valuable, desired, and important. Now that the mirror is gone, she is scrambling in the dark. The nostalgia she is projecting is rarely about wanting to build a healthy, balanced future with you. It is almost always about soothing her own present anxiety and proving to herself that she still possesses the power to make you weak. She creates the powerful illusion that she has finally changed. She gives you the exact validation you were starving for when you were still together. But you must ask yourself a very harsh grounding question. Why did it take your complete and total absence for her to finally remember your value? Why were these sweet words completely hidden when you were sleeping right next to her? The brutal truth is that she did not suddenly change her core character overnight. She simply changed her strategy because her previous strategy of taking you for granted completely backfired. Do not let the ghost of a good memory drag you back into a reality of consistent pain. You cannot build a solid foundation on a highlight reel of the past. You're not the man who trades his self-respect for a fleeting moment of artificial warmth. You're not the man who begs for scraps of the past while ignoring the reality of the present. You are the man who looks at the complete picture. You are the man who honors the good memories but refuses to let them become chains around his ankles. If you fall into the nostalgia trap, you will inevitably repeat the exact same cycle. The moment you step back into her frame, the moment you admit that you miss her too, the challenge is over. Her ego is instantly repaired, the anxiety fades, and within a matter of weeks she will revert to the exact same behaviors that broke you in the first place. A Stoic man understands that the past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. When she dangles the golden memories in front of you, you do not bite. You stand firm in the present moment. You remember the sleepless nights. You remember the unanswered texts. You remember the cold disrespect. You let the nostalgia wash over you like a passing storm, but you remain anchored heavily to the ground. You keep walking forward, leaving the ghosts of the past exactly where they belong. When the gentle breadcrumbs are ignored and the sweet nostalgia traps fail to break your stoic silence, her desperation takes a dark and sudden turn. This leads us directly to the third behavioural change you will experience when she definitively knows she has lost you, the sudden flip into anger and playing the victim. When a woman's ego is severely bruised and her manipulative tactics are met with a brick wall of indifference, the mask of sweetness completely shatters. The affection she fakes just days ago rapidly morphs into deep resentful hostility. You will watch in disbelief as the woman who recently claimed to miss your laugh suddenly accuses you of being the villain in her story. This psychological phenomenon is often referred to as an extinction burst. When a previously successful behaviour like getting your attention or making you chase her suddenly stops working, the brain goes into overdrive. It intensifies the effort, throwing a violent emotional tantrum to force the old dynamic back into place. Since pulling you in with warmth did not work, she will now try to drag you back in with absolute chaos. You will start receiving texts that are entirely different in tone. They will be long, aggressive, and filled with blame. She will accuse you of being cold, heartless, and cruel for walking away. She will rewrite the history of your relationship, conveniently erasing all the disrespect she showed you while magnifying every single mistake you ever made. She wants to trigger your guilt. She wants to poke at your sense of honour and your masculine desire to be seen as a good, reasonable man. This hostility is not limited to your private inbox. This is the stage where the smear campaign usually begins. You will notice passive-aggressive quotes posted on her social media, carefully designed to make her look like the innocent survivor of a toxic man. She might start telling mutual friends heavily distorted versions of the breakup, casting herself as the ultimate victim of your sudden, unexplained abandonment. She is weaponizing public opinion, hoping the pressure or the sheer injustice of her lies will finally force you to break your silence. This is an incredibly difficult test of your emotional resilience. When someone you once loved actively assassinates your character, every instinct in your body will scream at you to fight back. You will want to pick up the phone, lay out the facts, and defend your reputation. You will want to aggressively point out her hypocrisy and remind her of exactly why you had to leave in the first place. Your ego will demand that you set the record straight and prove that you are not the monster she is portraying you to be. Do not do it. Do not send that angry paragraph. Do not call her out on her lies. Do not defend yourself to mutual friends who are foolish enough to believe a one-sided story. The moment you engage in that battle, you lose the war. The second you try to defend yourself, you're stepping right back into her frame. You're giving her exactly what she wanted all along, which is your time, your emotional energy, and a clear signal that she still possesses the power to control your state of mind. Her anger is not about the truth. Her anger is a desperate, flailing attempt to regain a reaction from a man who has successfully escaped her orbit. If she can make you angry enough to argue, she knows you still care. Hate and love are two sides of the same emotional coin. The opposite of love is not anger, but absolute unbothered indifference. You must view her hostility as the ultimate confirmation that you made the exact right choice by walking away. A woman who truly loved and respected you would reflect on the loss, not seek to destroy your character. You are not the man who gets dragged into petty drama. You are not the man who begs to be understood by a woman committed to misunderstanding him. You are not the man who trades his hard-earned peace for a pointless argument over the past. You are the man who lets his silence be his ultimate defense. You are the man who knows his own truth so deeply that he does not need anyone else to validate it. You are the man who understands that a lion does not turn around when a small dog barks. You observe the chaos, you recognize the desperate manipulation, and you continue walking your path without breaking your stride. Let her be angry, let her play the victim, and let her realize that her tantrums are no longer your problem. Now that we have exposed her tactics, we must address the single biggest point of failure for men in this exact situation. This brings us to the core mistake that ruins everything you have built. The mistake is breaking your sense. It is the fatal error of misinterpreting her ego-driven panic as a genuine realization of your worth. When you see her shifting behavior, when you see the breadcrumbs, the nostalgia, or even the anger, your ego is naturally going to feel a massive surge of validation. You will look at her frantic attempts to get your attention and think to yourself that she finally gets it. You will tell yourself that she has finally realized what a good man you are. You will convince yourself that the time apart has magically cured all the toxicity, disrespect, and emotional exhaustion that drove you away in the first place. This is the exact moment where your own mind becomes your worst enemy. You start to rationalize breaking the strict no-contact rule you set for yourself. You think that because she reached out first, the power dynamic has permanently shifted in your favor. You boldly believe that you can safely respond to her without losing the upper hand. You assume that if you give her just a little bit of your time, she will finally treat you with the respect you always deserved. But this is a massive, devastating illusion. You are deeply confusing her frantic fear of losing control with a sudden miraculous capacity to love you properly. These are two completely different psychological states, and treating them as the same will cost you dearly. If you reply to her, you instantly destroy the very mechanism that made her respect you in the first place. The only reason she is chasing you right now is because you proved you were strong enough to walk away. Your silence was the heavy iron boundary that forced her to look at your value. The exact second you break that silence to comfort her, to argue with her, or to soak up her nostalgia, you completely demolish that boundary. You signal to her that you are still available, still waiting, and still highly susceptible to her manipulation. You prove that your stoic departure was not a permanent standard of self-respect, but merely a temporary negotiation tactic born out of frustration. When a man makes this common mistake, the outcome is highly predictable and deeply painful. She might play along for a few days or maybe even a couple of weeks. She will act incredibly sweet, highly compliant, and exactly like the woman you always wanted her to be. But the moment she feels secure again, the moment she knows she has you firmly back in her emotional grip, the mask will slip entirely. The old toxic behaviors will return with an absolute vengeance. The disrespect will resume, the text messages will slow down to a halt, and you will find yourself right back in the miserable, anxious cycle you fought so hard to escape, except this time it will hurt significantly more because you gave away your power willingly. You must deeply internalize this harsh truth to protect your future. Her reaching out is not a victory lap for you to proudly run. It is an active, dangerous test of your resolve. A woman's sudden spike in interest after a breakup is almost never about you. It is entirely about her own inability to handle rejection and the sudden loss of validation. She wants the high of knowing she can still have you, not the heavy daily responsibility of actually keeping you happy. She wants the warm emotional safety net of your unconditional presence without having to offer any real loyalty or consistency in return. You're not the man who falls for a temporary illusion. You are not the man who trades his long-term peace for a short-term ego boost. You are not the man who believes that a few sweet text messages can somehow erase months of blatant disrespect. You are the man who looks at consistent actions, not empty words. You are the man who requires undeniable effort before he even considers opening his door. You are the man who values his own time far too much to waste it on a cycle that goes absolutely nowhere. You must protect your progress with ruthless, unwavering dedication. Do not look at her frantic behavior as an invitation to return to the past. Look at it as the ultimate confirmation that you made the right decision by leaving. When you remain silent in the face of her emotional chaos, you are doing something incredibly rare. You're actively choosing yourself. You're refusing to participate in a game where the rules are rigged entirely against your mental health. This is the hardest part of the journey, but it is also the most defining moment of your character. Hold the line, keep your silence absolute. Do not give her the satisfaction of a response, because your peace of mind is simply no longer up for negotiation. This brings us to the only logical path forward. This brings us to the Stoic solution. True Stoicism is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending that you never cared about her. It is not about turning your heart into stone. It is about recognizing that your peace of mind is the single most valuable asset you possess, and refusing to let her erratic, shifting behaviors dictate your reality. You have witnessed her calculated breadcrumbing. You have seen the emotional manipulation of her nostalgia traps. You have endured the sudden chaotic anger and the predictable victim playing. Now you must make a definitive choice. You must choose to permanently elevate yourself above the noise. The ultimate power move in any dynamic where you are undervalued is complete unbothered silence. Understand clearly that your silence is not a weapon of petty revenge. It is an impenetrable fortress of self-respect. When you completely remove your attention, you are removing the very fuel that keeps her dramatic games alive. She desperately wants a reaction from you. She wants you to be overtly angry, visibly sad, or secretly desperately hopeful. Giving her absolutely nothing is the most deafening authoritative answer you could ever provide. It shows her, and more importantly, it proves to you that you are entirely in control of your own emotional state. Many men mistakenly believe that they need closure from her to properly move on. They think they need one final dramatic conversation to make her truly understand the depth of her mistakes and the pain she caused. Let me save you years of endless frustration. You will never get genuine closure from a woman who fundamentally lacks the self-awareness to see how poorly she treated you. The closure does not come from her delayed apology. The closure comes from your quiet acceptance of reality. The closure comes from the empowering fact that you walked away, you survived, and you are thriving without her. You are not the man who waits in the dark for an apology that will never arrive. You are not the man who needs a woman's fleeting validation to feel whole and complete. You are not the man who lets the lingering ghost of a toxic relationship dictate the trajectory of his future. You are the man who accepts the bitter truth and uses it as raw fuel for his own personal growth. You are the man who builds a life so incredibly compelling and purposeful that looking backward is no longer a viable option. You are the man who guards his inner peace with absolute, ruthless discipline. When the urge to reach out hits you, and it will inevitably hit you hard on the quiet, lonely nights, you must immediately anchor yourself in cold logic. Remind yourself of the exact heavy feeling of exhaustion you felt when you were desperately trying to make her care. Remember the paralyzing anxiety of waiting for a simple text message that never came. Compare that chaotic, miserable past to the quiet, stable peace you are actively building right now. Your silence is doing all the heavy lifting for you. It is systematically dismantling her fragile ego, but more importantly, it is healing your exhausted mind. You do not need to prove a single thing to her anymore. You do not need to win the breakup or have the last word. You only need to win your life back. Focus relentlessly on your masculine purpose, your physical strength, and your mental resilience. Let her live entirely with the phantom of your permanent absence. Let her wonder what you are doing, who you are with, and why you never ever looked back. That is her burden to carry now, not yours. You have paid your emotional dues, you have learned the harsh psychological lessons, and you have finally stepped completely out of her toxic arena. You are untouchable. You are grounded. You are truly free. You have walked through the fire of her shifting behaviors and you have emerged completely intact. You are not the man who breaks his silence for a fleeting moment of artificial comfort. You are not the man who trades his hard-earned dignity for a woman who only recognizes his value in his absolute absence. You are the man who prioritizes his own growth, his own respect, and his own future. If this message resonated with the silent, heavy battles you are fighting right now, I invite you to drop a comment below and share your experience. Let this space be a powerful testament to your resilience and a guiding light for other men walking the exact same path. Subscribe to the channel and join this growing brotherhood of men who refuse to settle for anything less than profound mutual respect. Until next time, stay grounded, stay fiercely focused, and always put your mind before skin.